and one of the attendees at the rally, uh, who was there to see the commander-in-chief, was Tori Sachs from Michigan Rising Action, and Tori joins us now on the other end of our line. Good morning, Tori. How are you?
Good morning, Rich. I'm doing great. How are you?
Doing very well. Tell us, for those who don't know, what is Michigan Rising Action?
Michigan Rising Action is a conservative group that really focuses on holding liberal policies accountable and promoting conservative policies.
All right, and give us your take on what the president had to say. You were there. What was the experience like, and what was your take on what he had to say?
Yeah, it was a great event. There was a lot of auto workers, a lot of suppliers, a lot of their families were there. People, I wouldn't call it a Trump rally. It was a, USMCA trade, auto, agriculture celebration.
Okay.
And people were excited. People were excited that the president, many who they voted for, a Republican for the first time in a long time, did what he said he was going to do and renegotiated NAFTA, put Michigan workers first, and people were excited. I think the big thing that we need to talk about is, particularly for Michigan, but for the whole country, this is going to create jobs. This is going to add trade. It's going to open up the market in Canada for our dairy farmers, and it's really going to expand the amount of components that cars have to have made in the USA. So under NAFTA, it was 62%. Under the USMCA, it's going to go up to 75%.
Yeah, definitely a big boost there for the president. How concerning is it for those who support the president? You've got this trade deal there. It really, from the way I see it, this would be making major headlines if not for the Senate impeachment trial that's been going on. Unfortunately, this trade deal has been kind of under the radar, as a result of what's going on with the impeachment trial. Yeah, how concerning is that, for the president and for those who support him?
Look, polls in Michigan as recently as about a week ago still show that people don't, they're not focused on impeachment. They're focused on health care. They're focused on jobs. And I think the reason, President Trump came here, and I think it was great, is that people in Michigan are still focused on jobs. They want to keep the economy growing. They want to make sure that we're opening up more markets, that we have fair trade, that our jobs are not being forced overseas. And I think that's what the president's been focusing on. I don't think voters in Michigan are focused on impeachment. I think the fact that Donald Trump was able to get the USMCA passed, the best trade deal that we've seen for Michigan in a very long time, he got that passed despite impeachment through a Democratic Congress. And I think that's what leadership looks like, continuing to fight for workers, continuing to fight for Michiganders, despite, the impeachment political process of Washington, D.C.
We're talking with Tori Sachs from Michigan Rising Action. The president, during that speech, he said, and you've said it as well, that this deal will bring jobs to America. It'll bring jobs to Michigan. Focusing on the Michigan angle here, in our state, any idea on some of the specifics on who in Michigan would be impacted directly by this trade deal? And by impacted, I mean beneficially impacted. And, who would, I guess it would be manufacturers who would be. What do we know about that, about job, what jobs would be coming to Michigan and all that?
Rich.
Yeah.
It's a great question, Rich. And I'd say the first thing that comes to mind for people is manufacturing. And I'm not just talking about GM and Chrysler and Ford. I'm talking about auto suppliers, right? And making sure that everything that goes into the car is continuing to be made in Michigan and the United States. So that's going to be a big win for some of those smaller auto suppliers, people in places like Warren, Auburn Hills that have, 100, 200 employees, they're going to see that go to 250 employees, 300, which also then impacts those local communities and all the surrounding businesses. But another huge win of the USMCA is for our dairy farmers. Canada has really been regulating their trade and dairy industry and really forcing our farmers out of their market. This opens up Canada for our dairy farmers and allows them to compete there, and that's pretty exciting.
Yeah, it definitely is. Tori, before we let you go, yeah, anything on the horizon for Michigan Rising Action? Any upcoming events or anything that your group is involved with here in the days and weeks ahead?
Thanks. We ask people to stay up to date with us at MichiganRisingAction.org. We're going to be tracking the President's State of the Union speech next week, as
Hmm.
well as Governor Whitmer's State of the Union response. And we're going to keep putting out facts on things like the USMCA, but also fact-checking, these far-left policies that seem to be coming to Michigan, like Medicare for All and the Green New Deal.
Yeah. That's an interesting point you bring up. Not just the President's State of the Union speech, but Governor Whitmer delivering the Democratic response. What's your take on that? Because it puts Michigan on the map, but it's the Democratic governor and a Trump opponent, obviously delivering the response to it. How do you feel about that?
I think Governor Whitmer, she ran her campaign on fixing the roads. I think people gave her the benefit of the doubt that she would do that in a legislative bipartisan fashion. Instead, she proposed a 45-cent gas tax increase that both Republicans and Democrats didn't support. No Democrats in the state legislature even introduced a bill to support it last year. So now she's introduced, has already taken out $3.5 billion in bonds, essentially maxing out the state's credit card, making our kids pay that back with compounding interest over the next 30 to 40 years. And I think what's the difference there is President Trump has showed, despite political, theater in Washington, he's been able to get things passed like the USMCA, the best trade deal for Michigan, the best trade deal for Michigan workers. And he's really focused on those policies still. And I think that when people see that laid out next to each other, they'll understand who's fighting for them and who's just there for politics.
Tori Sachs, Michigan Rising Action. Tori, thanks so much for joining us this morning.
Thanks, Rich.
And you are listening to the 1320 WILS Morning Wake Up.